Okay, and last but not least, we're going to look at count vowels, writing the count vowels function. Now, if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend that you stop watching this video and try count vowels on your own. There's a really close one, count E, that's very similar, that should show you the bare bones basics of how to go about solving a counting problem. All we're doing here is, instead of just counting E, we're generalizing this problem to count all vowels. And so you have enough information to go ahead and try to take a stab at that. Once you've taken a stab at it, then please feel free to come back and watch the rest of the video. Okay, so we're going to work on our final function for this program. And I'm going to take out our working function call, and I'm going to paste it down here, where I'm going to try and test count vowels. Hi, hello, and oof. This is our working function call, and I'm going to do the same thing I did up here. Oh, I'm writing my test even before I've written my function stub. I'm going out of order. So this is count vowels this time. And yes, PyCharm is telling me that I've made a mistake, that I haven't actually finished it yet. Okay, so we've got our working function call, and then we have our test. So let's see. Will this help me try and do this? Some IDEs will actually, and here this one will create function vowels. Cool. So sometimes some IDEs will help you create things. So this one helped me create def count vowels param, and it's up to me to say what the parameter is. In this case, it takes a list of strings as a parameter. Okay, and then it should return the total number. So again, this is going to follow a very similar process as before. Okay, so again, this is a sum. It's going to aggregate values in our loop. And for the moment, I'm just going to return num vowels. Again, this is our function stub. I'm testing to make sure that our test case is set up correctly before I dive in to writing the function. This helps me limit the number of bugs I'm introducing at any one time. Okay. So, oops, one thing I forgot to say though is that it's nice to tell myself what function it is so I know what the output is. And so this is really a good habit that you want to get into, is to label what it is you're outputting so that you can understand it. Let's try that again. Okay, so count vowels is false, and my active function call here says it's 0, which is exactly what I'm returning. Okay, so our test case is in place in our main. We have the rest of the program set up properly. So now we can dive in to our count vowels function. And so this one is going to take a list of strings as a parameter and returns the total number of upper and lower case vowels in all the strings in the list. Well, let's start with something very similar to what we had for count E. So for string in list, okay, this is where it's going to start being different. Let's just try to kind of write out what we're thinking here. So string dot upper dot count A, num vowels plus equals string dot upper dot count E. Okay, and I'm gonna go through and copy and paste this. When you start copying and pasting, that should be a huge red flag that you're doing something inefficiently. A, E, I, O, and U. The whole point of programming is to not repeat ourselves, right? The computer is doing the heavy lifting. We are trying to write our code in as succinctly as possible and as efficiently as possible. So I believe this will work. Let's run it. Woohoo! Yes, our test case works, but we do not want to stop here. So what the problem here is that this is not a dry solution. Okay, so this is inefficient. and repetitive. Okay, so dry, if you haven't heard this word before, which you hopefully should have, dry equals don't, oops, let me spell this correctly so you can see the acronym. Don't repeat yourself. And this is a super, super important concept in programming. If you continually follow this one principle, it will take you from novice programmer to expert programmer. Whenever you write code, once it works, once you're sure that it works correctly and you know how to implement what it is you're trying to do, then take a moment before you hit that submit button or before you move on to the next problem, take a moment and analyze your own code. Okay, this is just like how we write first drafts and then we read them over again for English class and we find things that we can improve. The same thing can happen when you're writing programs. It's just writing in a different language. And dry, the concept of drive, not repeating oneself, is really the mantra you want to follow, because all higher level programming concepts and design concepts can be derived from this single principle. At least I believe this. Once you get to be an expert programmer, you can disagree with me, as some other expert programmers have. But at this level, at the stage you're at, don't repeat yourself will take you a huge, huge step further. So let's apply this principle to this code that we just wrote. Okay, so we're repeating everything but the A, E, I, O, and U. Okay, so there's a lot of repetition, a lot of inefficiency. The first inefficiency is that we're calling string.upper over and over and over again with no difference. So a really simple thing we can do is to create a variable for this. Oops, let me write this correctly. String.upper. And so instead of calling string.upper every time, we can use this variable. Okay, so that's more efficient. So now we've solved the efficiency problem. However, this is needlessly repetitive. Look at how many times I had to replace string.upper with upper. 5, once for each vowel. That is totally inefficient, and that's one of the major reasons why we want to make our code dry, is so that when we need to make a change, we don't have to make it in 5 places, we make it in one well-defined place. So this copying and pasting here, I can already see that it's overly repetitive. When it's overly repetitive, so we're repeating something, that should give you the hint that when you have too much repetition, this means we should look into loop. Okay, we want to look at a loop. So let's give that a shot. So really what we're doing here is we're going through all the vowels, A, E, I, O, and U. So for each vowel in A, E, I, O, U, right? This could be a list or a string here, right? But we're trying to go through each vowel. And so now what I can do is I can indent one of these and replace this with vowel. And this loop is going to replace all of these lines of code, which I'm going to comment out just so you can see how much more elegant the solution is. Okay, so instead of typing out num vowels plus equals upper dot count 5 times, I'm doing it once inside of a loop. Okay, and now the last test. I have not changed my functionality, hopefully. I've only made it more efficient and easier to read, easier to change and debug, and more concise. So now the question is, when I run my test down here for count vowels, is it going to work the same? Let's see. And why yes, it does.